These are the days.
Ladies and gentlemen, with the power invested in me, I'm now going to attempt to contact a living. So we're coming from Mount Lawrence tonight. Well, we'll rock on. The Poetry Circle, in association with April is Poetry Month in Limerick, presents a reading with three poets, Edward O'Dwyer, Francis Browner and John Liddy. Edward O'Dwyer is from Limerick, Ireland, and writes poetry and fiction. His total collection of poems from salmon poetry entitled Exquisite Prisons. The collection, Lorraine on Cruises Street, 2014, was highly commended by the forward prizes, while the poem, The Whole History of Dancing from Bad News, Good News, Bad News, 2017, won the H.M. Michael Hartnett Festival 2018 Best Original Poem prize. His story, The Man Who Became Poems, was recently a finalist in the London Independent Story Prize. He is on Twitter at Edward O'Dwyer, to Edward O'Dwyer.
Might need updating now, I don't know where that one was pulled from, but it will be forever known as the historical inaccuracies. So my most recent book is Exquisite Prisons. It's just out in November 22. So I'm going to be reading from that. It's a third collection of poems with salmon, and just want to thank Dominic and the Limerick Writer Centre as well for the opportunity to read here and to read with two fine poets, Francis and John. So it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you as well for choosing poetry over Liverpool and Manchester, or Arsenal and Manchester City. If you forgot the match was on and wanted to dash out the door, I won't hold it against you, others may. So I'm going to start with a poem called The Girl in the Window, because there are three lovely windows here beside me. So this is very loosely about somebody that I remember who lived around the corner. Didn't really know her, but I was on my way home from school and I'd always see her kind of looking out the window pretty much every day. The family that were living there, they moved house, so it wasn't anything as sinister as what pops up in the poem, but I just kind of used the memory of her face in the window to produce this. So it's The Girl in the Window. She isn't there now. That window, it's just an empty window. She was there, sitting up in bed, mornings, afternoons and evenings and through all weathers, she was sitting there. I never saw her out here, playing with any of the other kids. I never saw her at school, only there, looking out expressionlessly at our games and arguments, our small triumphs and defeats. Kicking the ball over and over against this wall isn't quite the same anymore. Where has she gone? I tried to tell myself she is just looking out another window, that she's sick of looking at us, and there are moments when I believe it, but then catch myself once more looking over my shoulder and up at that window where she used to be. I'm moving kind of in a linear way through the book to hopefully make it easier to find the pages. Well, I suppose time will tell how I get on with that. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the poet Stephen Dunn. He died a couple of years ago, but right up until the moment he died, he was my favourite living poet. I don't know if he's my favourite dead poet. He's high up on the list, so he wrote a book of essays on poetry, and I took a line from one of the chapters. The line is this: "No one could free me from Richie Swartz. Richie Swartz turned me inward to where doubts are. There's always a Richie Swartz out there." Now the question is, which of you are the Richie Swartz in the room? So this poem is called "There's Always a Richie Swartz." You have your shadow and you have Richie Swartz. He has always been there, but you first noticed him at the age of 7. He was the kid who had just moved into town, climbed the only tree that had defeated you, won all the adulation of your peers, for whom you would never again be champion. You thought you were escaping him by the age of 8, Dad getting the job upstate, your lives packed into boxes, loaded onto a truck, one of the waving hands in the rearview mirror, that of Richie Swartz. But he followed you. There he was again when you were 16. You turned around from your locker, and at the other end of the school corridor, she was laughing. His words getting comfortable inside her ears. She handed over her books to him. At the end of the week, they were going steady. Though you moved across the country on a basketball scholarship, it was to him again that coach, during timeout, ordered the ball so he could shoot the championship winning shot in those dying seconds. The shame of it, you hoped he'd miss. The hypocrisy, you hoisted him onto your shoulders, paraded him around for the frenzying crowd when he didn't. Experience has taught you the impossibility of eluding him. At dinner tables, he has beaten you to the joke you were about to make, everyone present laughing hysterically. When you were pipped to the big promotion, there he was again, smiling for a photograph with the CEO, his secretary popping a bottle of bubbly so they could toast his appointment. Now you're 91 and laid out on your deathbed alone, and you're expecting no reprieve, and sure enough, there he is again. At the other end of the ward, Richie Swartz, the one and only, speaking the words to allow his throng of visitors to laugh through their raining tears, dying so much better than you possibly could. Isn't it always the way? Okay. Next up on my list was a poem called Leonard Cohen is Dead, but I'm going to skip that because I'm really running the risk of having you think that I write too much about death.
It's just about love.
Yes. Yes, I did a fine job correcting that misconception, didn't I? That's right, yeah. People started to think of me as a sort of a writer of romance poems. I'll show you. So I'm going to go to a poem called The Proof. Yeah, no one dies in this, it's great. Yeah, I can read this. Funnily enough, it's about a woman who is allergic to electromagnetic signal. Essentially, she's allergic to Wi-Fi. So obviously, life in a big city became quite complicated for her. Don't know the specifics of her going to court, but I do know that she had to leave and she was provided with some resources to do so. Her name was Marina Richard. It's called The Proof. In the loneliest moments, I will my body to crumple, fold itself up origami-like, do it so exquisitely as to shrink and finally vanish, pierce the chink in the armour of physical law. The city caused me heart palpitations and nausea and migraines. I could take no more there, and so I left it behind, came to a converted barn with no electricity in the mountains of southwest France, where those cellular towers are far off, where an electromagnetic signal doesn't have any business being. There are no emails out here needing sending, no one asking for a Wi-Fi password. But I do miss Toulouse, the hubbub of its streets teeming with people, the urgency and impatience of that life, all its swirls of noise and colour, all its little validations. If I go to my door and scream, no one is going to hear me. I've done it plenty. Nothing at all will stir, the wind's whistle won't even flinch. Each day I go to the mirror to see that I still exist, then pass the night convincing myself the reflected image of my body and face is the proof. I'm going to read a poem called Not Talking. It takes a line from an Ian McEwan novel, Sweet Tooth. Sometimes I just latch onto lines and things. I don't know if you do that. I think everybody does that. I latch on to a line. I have a little notepad where I have a kind of collected little lines, and some of them I go back and do something with. And then some of them remain, lost in the void of that journal. But this one I took from Sweet Tooth. The line is, "Sometimes not talking is the best way through a difficulty." I think that's a fancy way of saying shutting up is the best way through a difficulty. I can relate to that. I say lots of stupid things, so I can definitely relate to that. Not talking. Something minuscule. I can't remember what. Not talking took us through breakfast, then through lunch, and then through dinner, and then back to breakfast once more. Both of us stewing, cranky, stubborn as fuck. But nothing serious, of course. Just not in any hurry out of it. The peace, the quiet. To be back stringing together all those careful garlands of syllables. Some years going by, and the bills continuing to be paid on time, appointments kept to, the stove turned off every night, and the 2 dogs fed and walked. Each night we managed to sleep with no wane in the skill of it, its spatial conciliation, its unique intimacy, full agreement there still in the various twists of limbs. And later again, stooping over you and kissing your cold, blued flesh. For the life of me, try as I might, I still can't recall what it was, that minuscule thing, not talking, was getting us through. Oh dear, I've slipped back into death. Sorry. Much different. Yeah, it's a kind of a poem. Yeah, see how easy love is when 2 people shut up, called Peaceful Hour. I'd like to point out that this is just a weird little imagining of mine. This is not something that happened. I hope it didn't happen anyway. But it's a poem about motherhood, I guess. It's called Peaceful Hour. When the woman cannot get her baby to stop its crying, to stop its wailing, in fact, the look in her eyes is arguably infanticidal. She steers the pram a few blocks to the nearest construction site, gets as close as she can to a hot spot of its hubbub, to its power drilling, its hammering, its vehicles pulling down walls. An hour passes, her eyes closed all this time. She is not sleeping, just ignoring the faces of pedestrians going by and gawking at the tableau, wondering what she might be thinking, standing here of all places with her baby, who may or may not be still wailing. She can't possibly tell anymore, which is, of course, the point. It's just kind of one of those poems. When I think back to the launch of this poem, one of Mary O'Donnell's very astute comments in the launch of it was, the world in these poems is a world in which nothing is inappropriate. So I think that's one of those poems that must have given her an idea like that. Here's another one. Oh dear, it's death again. The matter of a dedicated gardener's death. Anyone do any gardening here? Somebody? Yeah? Hands up, come on, show of hands. I'm a teacher, I need a show of hands. Perfect. So I guess this could be prophetic. For all you, no. The matter of a dedicated gardener's death. A dedicated gardener should die in his garden, doing the things that all of these years have made him a dedicated gardener. Not that he should plan for it, of course, or make any kind of preparations, but wouldn't it be fortuitous if it happened to be early March and there were clots of daffodils all about? Yellows always make a garden its most alive. There isn't any avoiding it. Dying must be done, but only after all the procrastination one can manage. And dedicated gardeners must die somewhere. And why not the garden? Its best version. The garden that's decided that's enough of winter, enough of colourlessness and bare tree limbs. The garden that's in a happy state of resurrection. Floral faces pushing up through soft earth. Imagine him now, the sky Kandinsky blue, as he abruptly drops a watering can or clippers and clutches his heart and then keels over. Don't turn away. Look at him, sprawled out there, sunlight settling on his face and arms. It's okay. Allow it. And feel glad for him. It's not the least bit inappropriate. I've no idea how I'm doing for time. Am I okay?
It's 19 minutes now.
Right. Okay. But sure, who's counting, Dominic? You got somewhere to be, Dominic. I said you could go to the match.
I don't follow football.
Sure, we'll read one to kind of stir the loins a bit. This poem is called Lust. Remember that old ad, Ronseal? What was the tag? Ronseal. It does exactly what it says on the tin. This is a poem that does exactly what it says on the tin. Lust. He replaces the empty wine glass with a fresh and generous pour. She neither utters nor gestures gratitude. That's okay. She's exactly the type that he prefers to be a bitch. She has finished making a nail appointment on her mobile phone, and she looks both very pleased with herself and very angry at the world. Maybe she can't make up her mind. A simple thank you would be diminishing. Dialogue would reduce it, taint his lust by tarnishing the dark secret of it. He returns to his place inside the counter, where the room is a cinema screen, and she is the star, and it is his prerogative to want her in unspeakable ways. It is better never to have her, of course. In the true spirit of lust, it is better to only imagine those lurid scenes. Too much perfectly good lust is spoiled by having. He polishes glasses, watches, thinks of how lust at its best should always be a continuation of want, the rapture of her kiss inflating to unrealistic proportions, the nirvanas of her body ever unreachable, behind closed doors, behind distance. He watches and thinks how lust should breed despondency, send a man to actions that are debasing, untypical of him, beyond undignified, and the opposite of sweet. He takes the empty glass he has collected from her table, holds it up to the afternoon light, and licks slowly the rim of it, where she has smudged her lipstick. Though quite aware it isn't normal, he feels alive, truly alive in the moment. So, where to? It's a poem on my list called Almost. I almost read it, but not quite. Skipping that one. I'm going to read a poem called In This Poem. Anybody find, those poems that refer to the act of writing a poem, or those self-reflexive poems, that are kind of a poem that are self-consciously aware of their own conscientiousness. I don't know. Something's gone wrong in that sentence. But you know what I mean. Anybody infuriated by those? No? Block your ears. Block your ears. This is absolutely one of those poems. Or go stand next to the construction site maybe. That much too. In this poem. In this poem, a member of the audience sneezes and says, "Excuse me." No. That's not. In this poem, a glamorous American woman steps off of a train at a busy station in a busy city in Europe and on a hot day. Everybody around her is speaking a language she doesn't understand, but it's the kind of rabble that sets a scene, like in a movie. And she, like in a movie, is unconcerned by it, as though secure inside a well-thought-out script. In the same poem, albeit in a later draft, she blows a kiss at an unidentified cheek. And this moment naturally changes the poem entirely. The strange and unique moments originally befalling the woman, becoming deleted, becoming obsolete by this invisible thing tumbling suddenly across the tepid air. That blown kiss is too important to leave hastily. What did or didn't happen doesn't matter anymore now that there is this kiss. consider yourself there, really there. And you'd have to think, if you want it, that it's yours to snatch out of the afternoon air. Presumably, though, you'll have to act quickly. No doubt others will be thinking the same thing. A wind has suddenly entered the poem, the way winds can come and go into poems, having done for centuries. Not so much that it is intrusive, this wind is just enough, a cabaret sort that makes her red dress ballet on her body. That's the thing about the wind in poems. It tends to be exactly as much as it should be. But back to the kiss, which is accelerated now, carried more purposely, fluttering less on the wind, still there to be snatched at by a sure hand. It will improve your day, that's for sure. And you could wear it on your cheek, of course, or better still, you could wear it on your lips. In this poem, you're being offered a kiss. The kiss offered is not real, and yet, maybe, is precisely the kiss you're in need of. You're telling me to take his hands down.
Could be worse.
I'm going to go to
Edward,
kind of a romance.
make it the last one.
Okay. This is the last one. Okay, so I had 2 more poems left, so I'm gonna. Yeah, they're both suitable to finish on. I'm gonna stick with this one. This poem takes place in a cafe. I love cafes. Some of my favourite places, cafes. Place to read my book, not my book, but read other people's books and have a coffee. That's all it takes to make me happy. This poem is called Crumbling. Thank you very much for listening. Crumbling. Find a cafe where the proprietor is rude and sighs when you politely ask her for a coffee. Where you can expect to never receive a smile and to always be given a rotten turpentine brew. Make it your regular place. If she brings you the best coffee you've ever tasted and greets you in syllables that are music and smiles a smile that's warmer than that coffee, this is not the place for you. Drink up fast, get out of there, never return. If you do, make no mistake, she will break your heart. She will come to the table at every opportunity and she will speak her extraordinary music. And she will smile the kind of smiles that make a reasonable man such as you ache to get down on one knee right there where, moments ago, she'd have swept up some crumbs and been tantalizingly close. The rude proprietor who sighs won't ever bring you a cookie you didn't order, saying it's on the house because, quite simply, she despises you. She will charge you and then hope you choke on it, and you might too, because it will be a vile cookie. But it won't be such a bad way to go, choking on her shit cookie in her dreary cafe, sliding from your chair onto its grimy linoleum floor. It could be so much worse, after all. You could have been in the other cafe, where you can be sure the cookie you haven't ordered, that she gives gratis, will be sumptuous, without doubt the best you'll have ever tasted, so impossibly delectable that as you gorge on it, you'll not even notice your heart is breaking, crumbling to pieces inside her hands. Thank you.
That was Edward O'Dwyer. Once again, barnstorming his way from the land of love and its equally trenchant blood brother, lust. Thank you, Edward O'Dwyer. We've seen his gestation. Once upon a time he was a young Edward. Then he metamorphosed into Master Edward. Now his Edward of middle years. Anyway, pardon me. Frances Browner is a creative writing and history tutor living in County Wicklow, Ireland. Her poetry has appeared in the Irish Examiner, Ogham Stone, Skylight 47, Poems on the Edge, Tales from the Forest, Ink, Sweat and Tears, a New Ulster, Bray Arts Journal, Boyne Berries and on Limerick's Poetry Trail. Her debut collection, Roots and Wings, was published by Revival Press in 2019. Micro-Chap of 15 poems was launched online by Ghost City Press, Syracuse, NY, as part of their summer series 2019. She facilitates Poets Parlour open mic in Greystones, Wicklow. Frances Browner.
Hi everybody. This is my third time to read here, and the first time was in January 2016 when I had my very first poem published in Ogham Stone, and the next time then was the On the Nail launch of my collection in February 2020. So this is the third. So I'll start with that first poem that I wrote about my uncle Michael, a Limerick man who emigrated to America on New Year's Eve 1950 when he was 22, and within 2 years he was fighting in Korea for the American Army. And he never spoke about it until 2011 when I interviewed him for a family history, and he spoke so eloquently I felt I had to record it somehow. I thought I had them all marked out. Oh well, I have to go looking. This was part of what do they call it, a triptych? Or a triptych. That was published, part 50. So it's called Minefield in Korea. What's my little card in there? Oh dear, stuck together. Okay. No, it's just the start of it. Okay, sorry about this. Okay, Minefield in Korea. We came upon boots and bones, heels and toes together, as if at attention, as if this unknown soldier, grown jaded of war, had wanted to sleep it off. While Sergeant went for help, I lit a Pall Mall and reached for a small bone, a finger perhaps that resisted. Pried it from frozen ground, cleaned it with my bayonet. As I cleared more mud away, I discovered bits of rotting fabric, rusted with blood. An armband, tattered and dirty, bearing the medic's red cross. One of our own was he. A second trove turned out to be his wallet with army ID, a driver's license from Minnesota, pictures of people in front of a sturdy red-bricked house, and a letter I did not read. How long would it be before they learned that their son was no longer MIA, but KIA? Their hope hopeless, prayers wasted. I nodded at my skeleton, for he was mine then. Imagined him heeding screams for help, stumbling and crashing down the hill with no thought for mines. Did he die instantly or linger fatally wounded, calling medic, medic to himself? I gazed over the valley at the hills all covered in an icy white-blue frost. Nothing stirred, a Christmas scene in this killing field. Why don't we wade across the valley to meet in the rising mist, share cigarettes, swap souvenirs, admire family photographs, find a common language? Why don't we walk away together wherever our hearts take us, so that when the call to arms sounds on the battlefield, there's no one there to hear? So also when I was researching this family history, the Browner Lynches of Limerick, The Lynches came from Athlunker Street. I came across my grandfather's IRA notes. He joined the volunteers in 1917, and later he was trying to get an IRA pension, which he never got, because they said not enough active service. So this is a poem. There's one sentence left out of me, of course, and it's called "Executed," and it's actually been chosen this year by the UCD Library Commemorative Poetry Jukebox. So it'll be available in Galway City between August and October, if anyone's down there on their holidays. And it's called "Executed." I once knew a man who had another man shot, had him executed. A longer, more drawn out word, like the man's death, maybe. With the stub of a pencil, he'd scratched out the words, "Caught the spy Boland, handed him over, had him executed." Handed him over, like a loaf of bread or a sack of spuds, a creel of bog-brown turf. On what evidence, I wondered? Of the 200 informers executed during Ireland's War of Independence, 82 were ex-British Army. A West Clare man back from the war, safe from the trauma of the trenches, the beseeching cries of his comrades, gunsmoke, sickness, sweat. A man who had to kill a man he didn't know, had never seen, except across an enemy line. Caught the spy Boland, handed him over, had him executed. Did he betray them, reveal a name, the whereabouts of a meeting? Did he have someone die, Boland the spy, survivor of the Somme, relieved and happy to be home? To the seaweed, turf smoke, dillisk and periwinkles, the grass caressing his face, eggs and dripping bread for breakfast, his mother's warm embrace. Did they call him traitor, informer, classmate and next-door neighbour, enemies who'd once been friends? Did the girl he had his eye on before he left ever get to make amends? I knew the man who caught the spy Boland, handed him over and had him executed. Did you know, Grandad, when you wrote down the words, that one day I would read them? This next one is during lockdown. We had lots of great people looking after us with readings and Zooms and workshops, and this was not the time to be silent. Dora, you were involved in that, and Siobhan. I read a few times on it and then was kindly asked to submit something to their anthology. So this is The Age of Innocence, and it's for the Tune mothers as well as the babies. A villanelle. Promise you won't tell anyone, their dirty linen is on the line. An age of innocence has gone. Forgive me, Father, for what I done. To commit a sin is not a crime. Promise you won't tell anyone. Made to believe I was in the wrong. Made to leave home before my time. My age of innocence, all gone. Instead of a sister, I had a nun who left me on my own to pine and to promise not to tell anyone. My labour pains went on so long, I thought that I was surely dying. My age of innocence, well gone. You pulled from me what was mine, in the name of Mary, Mother Divine. Made me promise not to tell anyone, your age of innocence, long gone. And also on Zoom, we all like to have nice backgrounds, so I used to have all my lovely pictures on the wall behind me, and people often would remark on them. And I said, a friend actually came to visit one time, her first time to come to my home, and she said, you have a story about everything. So this is called Still Life. Sunrise over Beara, a yellow ball. Green blobs, the hills. Blue circles for sea and sky. Painted by Detroit Mary after a night in Koski's. Sold for £100. I think you were caught it, my father said. Two nuns emerge from a cloister, black robes, tall white cornets. Memories for my mother of the nuns in Hammersmith, where she nursed. Outside my cottage on Fort Pond, trees cast shadows on the grass. A solitary swan glides past, an idle raft, captured on canvas. Steps lead up to Fritz next door on a lazy Long Island afternoon. Sandy Cove, the 40-foot, Joyce's Tower, framed on my bedroom wall on Broadway. Now an annual celebration of Bloomsday. Please don't make me read the book, says May. An autumnal scene in Central Park, rust yellow, vermilion brown, snapped by Ivan when leaves carpeted the ground. Must be why they call it fall. Greystones harbour from the cliff walk, before the cranes and new marina were splattered on the horizon. A watercolour of Bray Head, purple in the mist, pink skies herald me home. Banagher Bridge spans the inky Shannon River, viewed from another Martello Tower. Winter trees, stark branches, dapple shade and light on the ground. Back to my roots. So my roots are in Offaly and Limerick. And now I'm in Wicklow. And tomorrow, you all know, is Poetry Ireland Day, and Eat the Storms podcast is presenting 32 poems by 32 poets from 32 counties. And I loved the way Damien, when he said, asked me to read, said, "You are reading for Wicklow." So my brother said, first member of the family to represent the county. They're all killing themselves playing golf and tennis and GAA and everything. So it's called Home at Last. I was first tempted to taste an alcoholic drink in the beach house down in the harbour. Vodka, blackcurrant and white lemonade. It was the summer of '71 regatta. My brother Jerry moved there in '89. We thought he was settling in the sticks. No dart, no N11, only a hungry monk, 3 coffee shops, 2 pubs, and Sweeney's chips. In Montauk, I met up with the brothers Ryan, Pauls Donnelly, Caffrey, Dee and Roisin. On a jetty overlooking Long Island Sound, they spoke of their magical hometown. They're building apartments in Charlesland, my sister-in-law Sarah said to me. So I shrugged, disinterested, as I logged onto daft.ie, and so began my homeward journey. So after 20 years in America, I came back to Greystones in County Wicklow, and found it hard at first, but now I'm getting used to it. So I'll read some, as again we said, tomorrow is Poetry Ireland Day, and Message in a Bottle, as you all know, is the theme. So I'm having an event in Greystones on Friday night in the Sailing Club. So the club is our bottle and the poems will be our messages. So I had to quickly write one myself. So this is probably the most recent poem I've ever read, or I've written so far. And it's called My Message to You. I wrote a message and put it in a bottle for you. Threw it on the water, saw it bounce upon the waves, disappear into the deep blue. I wrote about my situation, how I might have acted distant lately, like I didn't care, didn't dare, hope you would understand, give me time to stand on my own. I wrote about words I had said, my face flaming red. Memory assailed me, words escaped me. Were they lost in translation, miscommunication? Words I couldn't say to your face, lost in space, without a trace. Then I wondered, how were they going to find their way? Come back, I pleaded, starting to sway through the lacy foam, tripping over grey stones. Next time I'll text, WhatsApp, Instagram, phone, Facebook Messenger, you a poem. And just in case you think like Edward, I'm always writing really sad poems about war and a few things like that. I was runner-up one time for the witty verse in Percy French. Is that in Strokestown? I didn't get to go down. I think every year the Strokestown Literary Festival, yeah, they have a witty verse. So I got runner-up, but it was 2020, so I didn't get down to recite it for them. And I didn't win, so. But anyway, it's called Talk to Joe. I sent it to Joe, he never played it. The live line is open. Caller number 1, you're on. Hey Joe, come here till I tell you, Joe. Go on, so. Me pay is too low, the rent too high. Taxes are outrageous. I'd be better off when I die. Ah, no, don't say that. I'm having a problem balancing the books. There's no one to help me. Politicians are all crooks. Ah, you can't say that. The young one is not doing well at the school. Not learning anything. The teacher's a fool. Don't say that. There's one law for the rich, another for the poor. You won't get anywhere unless you're a cute whore. No need to curse. As for the healthcare, where will I start? I spent last week lying on a cart. Oh, sorry to hear that. Were you sick? No, the bloody doctor, he was a tick. Ah, stop it now, stop it. Click. There's another call coming in, caller number 2. How can I help you? Hey Joe, I'm fed up listening to the whinging. The last lad doesn't even work for a living. Ah, now don't say that. I do so, I know him. He lives next door. Stays in bed until 4:30. Okay, that's enough now. Time for an ad break. Jesus. Pause. Welcome back, everybody. Come in, caller number 3. Hey, Joe. Well, I'm in great form. Can't complain at all. Life is rosy. Game ball. Click. Joe. Are you there, Joe? Hello, Joe. Okay, Joe, I have a complaint, I swear. Life ain't easy, it isn't fair. And the live line is open on Radio 1. Talk to Joe. Caller number 3, talk to me. So that was came about when I came home first, and I'd be driving around listening to Joe. And I said to my mother one day, I wonder if you rang Joe and said you were in great form, you were having a great day. And she said he wouldn't answer. So he didn't answer this one either, which is a pity. So, actually speaking about my mother, she always used to say, don't write about me or any of my family. And I say, don't worry, Ma, your family are all kind of dull and boring. Dad's family, the Limerick side, were a little bit more crazy, so I wrote about them more. But I did that. But then, funny enough, I've written a lot about her since she died. But this one is called Then I Knew. Why did you go away? People used to say. On a whim I'd begin, no reason. A summer in Yonkers turned into 3 years. 9 long winters and summers on Long Island, the Bronx for the final 7. Why did you come back? People would ask. On a whim I'd begin, no reason. Then Ma was diagnosed, and for 3 years I took her to doctor's appointments, hospital visits, chemotherapy treatment. You were a great help, she said, in the end. So that was nice to get that validation of the reason really I had come home, which I didn't know at the time, of course. So, I'll go back to some Limerick poems. Oh, the Limerick, I was brought down one time to bring your Limerick to Limerick. So I think there was 10 or so of us came down to recite our Limericks. And what was mine? A lonely boatman from Bannerher had all the young ladies in a stir. At the helm he was hot, too cool to tie the knot, preferring to birth like a bachelor. Have I much more time, Dominic?
Couple of minutes.
Okay, I'll finish up so with you at. Oh, here it is. So, pretend you're happy when you're... Dad would begin. Blue, Ma chimed in. In Gilbert and Sullivan opera, he sang soprano as a boy, entertained cinema goers every Saturday in the Savoy. Soloist in the musical society, church choir and barber shop. Melody made him drunk, he never drank a drop. At rugby club celebrations, his peculiar claim to fame was to start the sing-along with a song for everyone's name. He sang in the railway station when the train had broken down, on their coach tours across Ireland, England, Wales, every city and town. Do not forsake me, oh my darling, on one knee for his wedding serenade, some enchanted evening, followed by This Is Our Lovely Day. Panis Angelicus gave us goosebumps. There is an Isle reduced us to tears. Goodbye from the White Horse Inn got us on the dance floor all those years. God keep you is my prayer. He held her hand without regret. After 56 years in harmony, they had reached their final duet, and still the only note she knew was blue. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Francis Browner. John Liddy grew up in Limerick, moved to Madrid in the early 80s, where he worked as a teacher librarian and has a degree from the University of Wales. He published many collections of poetry in English and Spanish and a book of stories for children. With Jim Burke, he founded and edited the Stony Thursday book, and he's on the advisory board of the Hong Kong Review. All his Spanish-related poems have been collected in a forthcoming book called Spanish Pines. John Liddy.
From the hands of my Spanish lady. Yeah, not a bad introduction, Tom. You're doing very well in the introductions tonight.
The extra fire makes all the difference.
I'll slip you an extra.
After all, I am your agent.
My agent. He was my agent once upon a time.
Oh, well, yeah.
For the angling cause.
Yeah, we got the last round in. That's another story.
Speaking about the Spanish lady, I begin with a poem. After I was reading Paul Durkin again one day, and this poem sort of came to me. I happened to be reading Paul and that first book of his, one of his early books, where he talks about Nessa mending an ancient wireless. And I was working away in the studio, but I happened to come out to the sitting room, and I saw Pilar with the couch upturned, and I said, "What's going on with the couch? I'm going to fix it." Because it was an old couch, and she was going to upholster it. So if I can find that one, I'll go for it. And I put it somewhere, but I have no order here, so I'll get there. And this struck me as one of the many talents that I've known Pilar to possess. And one of them is definitely looking after or repairing not only me, but the couch. Mending an old couch for Pilar. When you tackled the old couch, turning it upside down to hoover out the debris, remove the sag, determined to rectify the slouch. I recalled a poem by Paul Durkin about mending an ancient wireless. Praise indeed for a woman's skill and ingenuity, like your incursion into the skeletal frame of a life together, that single-minded fixing with measured cloth, sturdy foam, and a roll of elastic ribbon rife for equilibrium, the metal stapler sealing memories again, the old renewed with recycled springs, none the worse for wear, restoration complete. I admire what is intact and not discarded, maintained with effort, resisting the option to quietly ignore. I recently embarked on a collection of poems that a friend of mine, Jim Burke, urged me to do. We both have decided to try and recreate a lost journal about a cycling tour we went on of the west of Ireland when we were 17. And it's quite an interesting piece of work in terms of where does memory stop, or how faithful are our memories and so on. So we've gone into this, and I'm just going to read 2 or 3 from that and see how they go, really. My first time reading anything from those poems. If I can find them. Don't tell me I left them at home. God, it can happen. Oh yes. And one of my things was sort of in the journal, I seem to remember, was taking notes about the Irish speakers we met and the way they spoke. And I've gone back to that particular theme quite a lot in my work. And I've tried to be faithful to early memories, but I've also brought it forward into the present. Mirage. This is one dealing with that, and then I lead into the language form. Was that a wild daisy, a sprig of heather we just passed? A man sighing in a field, the scent of green to last a lifetime? Even as I write this now, touchable feather, like turf smoke, straw, a scene painted by Paul Henry. You and I going over the hill to leave it all behind for others to harvest what we reaped. 2. Maybe memories are made of this. Illusions lived with a passion last the longest. For better or worse, steeped in possibility, reinvigoration, another deception perhaps, or a hazy recreation of part without parcel. Words borrowed from time once lived, unfaithful servants of the echo shell. Viewed from isolation, with pen in hand, an act of mining the mind for the page, memory still intact until memory itself decides to no longer engage. 3. To catch a whiff again of odours we thought lost to us, to have adored that time in the fullness of limited resources, to have left some record for the poet O'Grady's approval, to have lived a writing exile with its demands on tenacity, reticence, endurance and guile, perceptibility of the tactile in the leaf's smooth underbelly, awareness fine-tuned to sense a cloud in the guise of Machiavelli, lingering overhead to release its almighty, unmerciful deluge, the observant eye not caught off guard even in old age. It's a sort of a lash at memory. And this is another one. A presence. All along the Cushorriga coastline, Connemara's chalked an ear, endurance and resilience in tight clusters of limestone fields, an eerie pattern to the chaos caused by upheaval of seasonal storm, since that first coastal settler dug in to tame its weather-beaten form. We could feel a presence in the night wind's guttural babblings, ancestral tongues in their infancy, but we couldn't read the landscape with uneducated eyes. Content to gaze where we sat enthralled on a grassy breast between Cuan Coshla and Unspidal, which locals called Untut Conan, Conan Whale's feed of shellfish, who emptied his pockets to shake that fertile shell mound long after the presence of the first Iberian Celt on this Mesolithic sound, dated by Gibbons and Ocostela to preserve this hollowed ground. And just one more from that. Either way. Is it up or downhill we go? No stopping the loss of air with age, time oxidizing the frame's mechanism that once moved on fulsome tires, sleek and slender like a thoroughbred, eating up the summer road on wheels pedalled as though we had 4 legs and 4 hearts, masters of the saddle, sure of our grip on the handlebars. With my 2 and 1 I now get by, still powered by the spokes in my head, the memory chain intact, and the ability to feel my way in the dark, a blessing. The mind working on tightened valves despite the frame's malfunctioning, and I know to conquer the hill is to admire the view, delight in and celebrate its descent. And leaving that idea with Jim, some new little 1 or 2 new points. The enablers. I have a little quote from Edmund Burke. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. What is it that enables the enabler to enable? Ambition, cowardice, loyalty, money. Artists enable us to see and hear. And we all remember some negative enabling. The blind eye, the deaf ear, the abandoned secretary reduced to tears by a bullying boss. The shut mouth that catches no fly, and all too familiar occurrence. But we differ from those vainglorious accomplices who revel in the nod and wink, placation and deterrence. Their role to obediently facilitate the autocrat's authority abrogation, the dictates of the powermonger, and sleep well at night. When the figurehead falls, they slip into oblivion and live quiet lives. some to the free speech chat shows excusing policies of gag and whip. Those enablers of atrocities, bloodbaths, crimes against nature and people, expedited by anonymous assassins, safe in their reciprocities. Reciprocate, what is the word?
Something like that.
Something like that, I don't know. Sorry about that. Fault lines. This poem does not want to play catch-up with the aftermath of the quake, of infants and elderly being pulled from the rubble, of those who wait in silence for a love sound. It does not wish to linger too long on the girl from Araman, whose note for her father, "You are my heart," saw the light of day in his hand, or on a white helmet cradling a war child from Aleppo, her face dirtied and dazed after 5 days under another kind of hell. The poem is not a newsreel or a camera sent in to capture dogs sniffing among the ruins for bodies after the diggers have removed the debris. It prefers to be a silent prayer, an offering for future hope in spite of Earth's fault line, or the flaw in the poem's struggle to speak for a child who may yet find peace, a healing sign in the poem's entrails, a smile from syllables that rhyme. We arrived in today to Limerick, and we're going tomorrow to the funeral of my dear cousin Anne, passed away 2 days ago. And I was desperate to try and give her this, which came out in a new Ulster, which I think you mentioned. And not to be, but I did manage to give her last July a copy, a typed out copy I did. And I don't think she read it, because it was done as a return gift to what she gave to me. Not only a year's subscription to the Magnificat, which I read during COVID, all 12. There were actually 14 issues. There's an extra one for Easter and an extra one for Christmas, I think. And anyway, I managed to plough through it and get through it and read lots of things, interesting things in it. And I thought it was the generosity of that gift that struck me. And so I wanted to repay that gift, and I wrote this poem, longish poem, which I will not dare read all of it. But it's from Anne, whom I was very fond of. I'll just read a couple of things from the beginning and go to the end. And it's What Else Is There. It's called What Else Is There, which is a line I saw written in one of the issues, I don't remember which. And it was not written as a question, it was written in the affirmative. What else is there? For Anne McGarry. Prefatio. What have I gleaned from your kind subscription to a year of the Magnificat? The volumes amassing until I found the will to peruse the missile-thin pages of antiphons, beatitudes, chants, hymns, prayers, psalms, readings, responsorias, gave closer scrutiny to the patrons of perpetual silence, of the oppressed and the indigenous, of cancers, fevers, humility and solitude, the wounded, broken and great hearts of the world, Oscar Wilde's literary rejects, patrons of communication, internet, television, hunters, trappers and hunting hounds, of aviation, birds, brewers, cattle, crops, farmers, gardeners and pets. What have I learned from that? And I've stopped it there suddenly because I really can't go on with this, but I go to the end and just finish with this ending of that I wrote. And it's the section that deals with meditations for the day. What else is there for me to glean from your gift by way of appeasement, to satisfy conscience, an expression finding its kenosis for the emptying, the source of all energy in the sinew, transforming effort into the search that allows me to daily continue with a poem prayer for a fairer existence, to implore all the saints in their celestial abodes for a cure to heal the wound with a stitch word, that the fragility of men and women may find recourse against imbroglio before the end of their day. Amen. And I'd like to finish with a little section from Arius, and it's, those Roman numerals are very confusing sometimes. Don't you find that? 42. Section 6. God, photograph. John Schindler's has just fallen out of the book. He did the cover. Such feverish thoughts disconnected, streels of you swimming in all directions. I woke from fantasies infected by stag beetles gnawing St. Ida's side. The girl who was forced to wear black shoes for first communion and cried her way to the altar. A hot cross bun for my sins, kinder dreams recalling the good old days yet to come, when the best music of all is the Irish language, according to Piper Clancy. A room of new furniture, says parish poet priest Micheál Liston. The ley line from window to window between empty houses of worship, an enduring sign that all is not lost, that the amber robin in Mam's garden will appear every year like Lefanu's ghost in his Glenstall ruin, that Ger Costello is the Wren Moor incarnate, and that somebody someday will return Michael Curtin to his corner, show due respect for the loss of a Bullfield sign as shown to O'Donoghue, who was restored to his Roxborough wall, like the bronze sword missing in battle from Sarsfield's hand on his concealed limestone pedestal near John's Cathedral. Those febrile wool gatherers recounted to buy some sleep from restless nights, when delirious thoughts ran riot like flushings cut into watered rock, clints of quarried stone, slugger for sink or swallow hole, magic in a turlock that comes and goes, flagstones lifting in Sparling's kitchen after the flood, a local hero in Noah's Ark, rescuing his neighbours with horse and cart, the poet Whelan throwing himself down for an hour, or the man who crossed himself twice when passing a house, Milltown Malbay with a settled Finnan, swimmers in the Todd at the tail race, Pat Lycett pointing out on Coran the Queen's Pass for salmon to avoid grapnel and sickle on their run to spawn, the gin in Quinn Abbey from Quince, wherein I walked on namesakes and pocketed a keepsake to evince time's passing destruction, a funnel of mortar for a writing desk in Madrid, along with an image of crow and gull beaking together in the borough field after a squally shower, the soft earth's echoes of Jimmy Ryan's cubs revealed like the Danes' false arrest as a spy brought to William Street Garda Station during a war called the Emergency, or explaining the word frock to a tourist baffled by Comiramancha, or looking for roses from Fennessy's on Rose Terrace. Gibberish for embroidering my yarn, inroads and insights for spooling myself in motifs I determined to discern. Along the lost arteries of Black Boy Pike, Range and Warden of Kelly, Walsh Doyle's cottages, to hear the bucket strike the water in the canal, feel for its weight, hauled up on Charlotte Quay by women who cared little for crown or state, to follow the smell of Steve Clancy's cart when manure was a pound in the pocket, a doctor's bill saved by a cobbled fart. The perfume of turf unloading, taste of burn and Ola minerals, glass and paper recycled before we heard of ozone, haste of steam engine hooting along train tracks now bestrewn, a two-sided uneven street, Merriman's Old Clare without sandals, Gardennehy's black bike hunting for boys on the metal, a rent collector's rent spent, a dead cert still running, the lost art of Pinky Downey's shop cum pub, immortalised by Jack Donovan, Harper's heads like my own in a strap. Is there no end to the flung drivel at the page? Fodder for the smarty pants and the lambaster fraughting for a roll, a kind reader to inhabit my dream not yet done, a thread softly as he said himself, a swim in my bloodstream, where words as I write them turn on themselves, brogue, clock, dig, gob, galore, phony, puss, slew, slogan, trousers and whiskey, all from Irish to English, as are the Normanisation of Archer, Castle, Guard, churlish to turn back the clock now, but we recognise the stair in 3 provinces, Ford of the Little Boat in Anacotti, Longford in Athlunkard, the Long Can in Quaker Joseph Lancaster, Abbey for Little Branch of the Shannon, all the Danish quays leading to river or sea, port, Partine, little landing place, long pavement, Moyne Namrahar, roadways through historic bog, a water weir in Corcadar, Corrigar, Galvone, on Galvone, English Moor, Cork and Ree, Moraregis, King's Corcus, Connaughton the processed blood on Blood Mill Road from bacon factories. Watch that pounding obscurity within the line. At least we have Olga Rouge to check us, to keep us respectively sane. Remember, O brothers, Jungle in all inchi shana, round the battery placed on King's Island? Or will we wander the Pobble-Brine barony beyond the burial ground for Black Death, safe in our break-on, unlike the quay, where the houses collapsed beside Barrington's Hospital, all the way out as far as Eileen Hanley's grave, all the way back to our Pont Newly and the view of yonder hills, because it is our native land and my home is there when not elsewhere, because we remember the Tinnacanov on the green, sweet boxes from Corner Shop, courtesy of Mr. Murphy, surprises from Bond's wholesalers, at last raised to bell, recitation and Moore's melodies, Slán, Lamaw, Rake and Blacksmith, the bards, caustic pamphlets, poems we learned at school, stories with pith about a lady called Celeste who appears at a masquerade dressed as a Jesuit, cattle driven between two fires, sapper stones and four-faced clocks, how O'Brien gave Urton the plague, when SE replaced ER on letterboxes, N to R in Limerick, doubtful croaker who didn't know himself, how many towers on the city's coat of arms, the meaning of a boydicade, balabus, platitude, dote, guts for garters, mooch, smooch, on the rantan, steam of piss in the teeming rain, the whole shebang, ingenuity applied to colonial conquest, raw, agus rula bula, sing-song, seesaw, all the way out into a future of new topography and careful effort in the tenacity of human endeavour, which in the flick of an eye can be thwarted, as I have said elsewhere, like our false sense of invulnerability in shaping new centres round Colbert with art hubs, sustainable housing, walkways, a bullet train to the airport, a thriving dockland and port, electric cars flying hither and thither, parking pads in the sky, ethos of place intrinsic, the fight for clean air to the fore, how to keep back the sea, a helping hand from a robot, the murmuration of starlings, not just a screen show for children who will make their own contribution to the saga as they grow. Thank you.
If there is anyone in this hall that hasn't acquired a copy of that tour de force which John so eloquently gave us, get ye to the book table instantly. Other volumes are available as well under the careful stewardship of Marion. That concludes the proceedings now from the Poetry Circle in association with April is the Poetry Month in Limerick, and you heard John Liddy, Francis Browner and Edward O'Dwyer. He's getting older by the minute. Only two more events of this year exist, of this poetry extravaganza. Tomorrow night, for Poetry Ireland Day, we present a special talk exploring the Aisling poem in the Irish tradition with John W. Sexton at 7:30 p.m. And on Friday, 28th, our final event will be the launch of Kieran Bevel's new collection of poetry, which will be launched by Kieran O'Driscoll. And in the words of the late great Liam Clancy, have you no homes to go to? Good luck.